Right. Today we talk about social media and development. There is no doubt that social media has taken the world by storm. It has become ubiquitous. Everybody is using social media, not only in developed countries, but in developing countries as well. Even in countries where there are no electricity, they have social media. So the question then for most of us is, how has social media changed us? In 2009, there were some studies about the role, how social media is changing society. And they said that it's doing it in 5 ways. First is where we get our news. I have a friend in the Philippines. He no longer subscribes to newspapers. He gets most of the news from social media. He doesn't even go to online news sites because all his friends post the interesting stories that people read in newspapers anyway. And besides, the other interesting thing about this is that they don't limit themselves to Philippine newspapers. Since he has friends living in the United States, friends who read the New York Times or the LA Times or the Washington Post post interesting stories from those newspapers. So his reading fare has become more varied. He's no longer limited to newspapers from the Philippines, but he reads newspapers from the US as well as the UK. So obviously, where we get our news has really changed, and this is really done by social media. The other thing where social media has made a lot of difference is in business. In particular, how we start business and how we do business. Before, you have to put up your own website for your business. Well, you still need to do that. But now, more and more, you use social media for that. So there are pages where you go and you like, and then you get to follow. For instance, I follow a particular restaurant in the middle part of the Philippines. I don't go there often, but I know the menu of that restaurant. I know their specials, and that is nice. So when I go there, I feel at home. And so businesses do that nowadays. They reach out more to targeted audience through social media. Social media is really most powerful in how we start and stay in touch with people. I have classmates who I've not heard from before, right? And when social media started, all of a sudden, I am in touch with them. And some of them live in the US, some of them live in Australia. And yet, because of social media, it's very easy for me to keep up with what they're doing, what's happening in their lives. The fourth thing about social media is that it allows us to reveal a lot about ourselves, right? Sometimes when we read social media posts, we feel that our friends post too much about themselves. They tell us who they were quarreling with, or even sometimes they quarrel publicly through social media. Sometimes I feel like, these are not parts of your life that I'm interested in, so please don't bring me into your quarrel. But whether we like it or not, when you have friends in social media, you get a whole variety of things. Some friends post only about political issues. Some friends post about what they eat. I'm not particularly, interested in that issue most of the time. But that's what happens. We get to know more. People reveal more about themselves, perhaps inadvertently through social media. The other thing that social media has done is that it has made us more influential, or at least has broadened our influence. And I think the best example here is the Arab Spring. All of a sudden, we saw Twitter being used in the Middle East to depose authoritarian governments. We still see this today in Bangkok, where the movement against the existing government is partly fueled by social media. So, yes, social media is changing our lives. The question, however, or the important question, however, is social media advancing the richness of human life? Now, this is another way of putting, is social media a tool for development? Development is defined by the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen as advancing the richness of human life. So, economic growth is not development. Economic growth is a means to development. You want to grow your economy because you want your people to consume more, to have more. So some people think that development is merely economic growth. That's not how we use that term today. This idea of advancing the richness of human life then led an organization like the UNDP to define development as a process of engaging people's choices and enhancing human capabilities and freedoms. So at the center of the development is the human being. And the question is, are we enlarging his choices? Can he do more things? Is he able, is he freer to do those things? So that is the question. Is social media also doing that? Now, for us to be able to answer that question, we step back a bit and ask, what is social media? Right? We're familiar with Facebook, we're familiar with Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and all of this, but why are they all the same? Right? One is about putting up pictures, the other is putting up posts, the other is about uploading video. What is it that makes them all social media? And that's what we're going to do next. Somebody once said, there are as many definitions of social media as there are users of social media. So everybody has his or her own definition of social media. There's an article that was published not too long ago entitled The 34 Different Meanings of Social Media. Right? So that author has compiled at least 34. And I'm sure since that article was published, it has grown. Now, so some would say, yeah, social media are internet-based tools for sharing and discussing information among human beings. Yes, nothing wrong with that, but I think it's still too broad because not all internet-based tools for sharing would be social media. The other interesting definition is that it is a thing of opposites, right? Compelling and annoying, time-wasting and time-efficient, useful and useless, right? I'm sure most of us have felt this about social media one way or another. But for me, what is a one-line definition is not very important. What I think we have to do is to look at what are the essential elements of social media. What is in common in what is it that is in Facebook, that is in YouTube, that is in Twitter, that is common. And that's the issue of essential elements. So, what are the essential elements of social media? The first is participation. Social media encourages contribution and feedback from everyone who is interested. Anyone can participate. There is a barrier to entry, though. Is one, you have to know how to use it. Right? You still have to know how to use Facebook and Twitter, and you know how to upload video. And second, of course, is that you have to have an internet connection or a mobile phone. Now, aside from that, anybody can participate in social media. The other one is most social media services are open to feedback and participation. And in fact, that is one of the key things about social media that is different from the traditional web-based applications, is that it allows for feedback. It allows for users, in a way, to talk back or to comment on what has been posted or go beyond commenting. The third essential element of social media is that it is about conversation. The traditional media that we're familiar with is broadcast, right? So it's one to many. Social media is conversation. It's about two people or many people engage in a conversation or a dialogue, if you will. The fourth thing about social media, it is community. Social media allows communities to form quickly and communicate effectively. So even in Facebook, you have friends. You could also have groups. And it's easy to do that, right? And you can have public groups or secret groups. So it limits, you don't talk to the world or to all your friends, you talk to only a subset of your friends. And that is just a few clicks away, and you're off with your community. And of course, social media is about connectedness. It links you to people, it links you to resources, it links you to other sites. So those are the essential elements of social media, right? To review, it's participation, it's openness, it's conversation, it's community, and it's connectedness. Now, another way of looking at it, aside from just looking at the common elements that is true across all different types, is also to distinguish it from other media. How is social media different from a telephone conversation? How is social media different from a broadcast TV or cable TV? Because these are all media, ways by which we communicate. The first thing about social media that is different from other media is that it is internet-based. More specifically, it is Web 2.0 based. Now, why is this important? When the web started, the World Wide Web, was a great thing, right? But it has limitations, which is, in a sense, it was a push medium. It was just giving you information, and you cannot talk back to the website, right? So in the early days, you go to a website, you read it, you download it, but that's the extent of your interaction with it, right? There's sometimes a way for you to feedback. You know, they solicit your comment, but it was very difficult and cumbersome. So it was essentially like, okay, most of the time we were simply consuming information from websites. Somebody else produces it, and the guys who produce it are professionals. So the banks have their website, newspapers have their online version. These were professionally produced that we consume. Web 2.0 changes that paradigm. Web 0.0 allows us to also produce information. So we're both consumers and producer of information using Web 2.0 or Web 2.2 technology. So as a platform, it allows for what we now call user-generated content. Content that we produce. Let's take, for instance, Facebook. Facebook is just a platform. What makes Facebook interesting are the posts that we put, right? YouTube is just another site, right? It's a big vault, as it were. What makes YouTube interesting, the reason why we go to YouTube, are for the videos that were uploaded by other people. Okay, some of them commercially produced, some of them produced by individuals. The most interesting of these are those of babies doing interesting thing, right? Babies dancing to the beat of some interesting song. Now, these were not professionally produced in studios like this. These were videos taken of children by their parents at the right time, right? It was so cute. They took the photo, they took the video and uploaded it to YouTube. That's what makes YouTube possible. Content created by the users, not by corporations. Although that's interesting too. But that's Web 2.0. It allows people to create content and share them with others, which was not present in Web 1.0. So social media is based on Web 2.0 technology. In a sense, that's the technology that allows it to be interactive, so we could create community that encourages participation. All the unique elements of the essential elements of social media that we discussed previously, right? So that's number one. What makes it unique is that it's internet-based and Web 2.0 based in particular. The second one is mobility and ubiquity. I guess mobility allows it to be ubiquitous, right? And of course, that means we use mobile phones or mobile devices. So anywhere we could take photos and upload. Anywhere we could, if a thought strikes us, we immediately share it with our friends through Facebook. Which means that regardless of where we are, we can do social media, right? So if I'm a Facebook user, I can be at home in the Philippines, and I could be here in Incheon, and still use Facebook, right? Still post or read posts from my friends. And the reason why that is possible is through mobile devices. So let's go to the third unique elements of social media. It is the focus on users. As I've already suggested earlier, the key difference between social media and other media is how easy it is for users to create the content and upload it and share it with the world. Of course, in traditional TV, you see this. For instance, CNN has a segment where ordinary users can post video, and then they could choose one and then show it, right? So, but that's very difficult to do, which means millions submit and only a few hundred get shown on CNN, because airtime in CNN is very valuable. But the model here is that, again, like as I said, what makes YouTube interesting and compelling is that you have a whole range of things that is available for you. You could watch regular television show on YouTube, or you could watch television shows made by quirky teenagers from some part of the world. You have a whole range of options because of the ease by which users can generate content, can put content online and share it with the world. The next unique element of social media is that it is multi-way group communications. What do we mean by this? It is not one-to-one, like a telephone conversation or a face-to-face conversation. It is not one-to-many, like in broadcasting television, but it is many-to-many, right? We call it end-to-end, which means that a lot of people can join in on the communications, and it allows that. Okay, precisely, that is what makes it unique. For instance, a telephone call, right, is a dedicated connection between two people. Nobody else can join the conversation. Well, of course, if you have a speakerphone and you have then other. But what I'm saying is, it was designed primarily for one-to-one. Broadcast, by its very broad casting, right? It means it is it comes from farming, actually, agriculture. When you plant seed, you broadcast, right? So you get a bunch of seeds, and then you broadcast it, right? So that then became the media model. Here, it's everybody gets to talk, everybody gets to share, but but it does not lead to chaos, right? In a sense, it is ordered. So what that means is people in multiple places, even across borders, can access and contribute to the contents. So the conversation need not occur only among Filipinos. It could be between Filipinos and Koreans, but we all have to speak a common language, which means English, or anybody else in the world who is interested in the conversation. Another element of social media that is unique is large-scale and flexible interactive participation. So again, because of its many-to-many nature, it's a platform to allow that, then you get interactive participation on a massive scale. We can read about the Egyptian uprising, right? You could follow it because it is on Facebook, because it is on Twitter. You just have to find the right hashtag. Because I could go to YouTube and find the latest video of the violence there. The same is true with Ukraine, the same is true with Bangkok. Regardless of the geographic location, you can participate in the event. Social media is also about co-creation. So when many people participate, you can do new things. The best example here is citizen science. When citizens become part of a big science project. Okay? So for instance, documenting the different kinds of bugs, insects. So this is something that if you want to do a catalog of all the bugs in the world, it's something that would be very expensive to do and very long if you have only a dedicated group of researchers doing that. However, today everybody has a smartphone with a camera, with an internet connection, so they can be part of those documenting bugs. Every time you see an insect, every time you see a bug, take a picture and you send it to a website. So your catalog gets bigger faster precisely because ordinary citizens participate in taking the photo, documenting, and then scientists will categorize and analyze later on. But the big part of data gathering is done in a decentralized manner, and you don't have to be a PhD in insects. All you have to know is how to take a photo and distinguish an insect, a bug, from something else, right? And most of us can do that. So we co-create, right? All of a sudden, a humongous science project becomes easy. Or at least easier than before, because we can distribute the collection of data. And that's what we mean by co-creation, right? Because we are able to participate in something that is collective in nature, we can produce new knowledge about the world. And of course, the low cost, right? In the Philippines Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, provides the right to all citizens to own newspapers or broadcast television, right? But how many Filipinos are able to put up their own newspaper, let alone broadcast television? Because of the cost. It's not for the lack of desire, but the cost is so huge that it defeats the best or the most interested of Filipinos. Now, what all you need for social media is an internet connection. So if you want to publish, you could do blogs. And that requires only a knowledge of Blogger or a few other software that allows you to blog. And with those essentially two basic things, internet connection, use particular software, you are able now to post your ideas, your thoughts, your take on news event, be read by the world, and the world could tell you what they think of what you've written. So some of my friends blog, Uh, and they're thrilled that people from Europe, people from Africa, people from the Middle East read what they wrote and comment on that. So this constitutional guarantee of your right to publish is realized because you no longer have to surmount the huge cost associated with newspapers. Again, you can have your own YouTube channel, right? My organization, Idea Corp, we have a YouTube channel because it's easy, and then we post video that we've produced. We're not very good at that. We only have a few. But still, the idea that a small non-profit organization in the Philippines can actually have a channel by which they can spread the word, they can spread what they've produced, is amazing and unthinkable before the age of social media. So it's the low cost, I think, that makes this a very powerful medium, because anyone, save for a few prerequisites, can have their own newspaper, a blog, or can have their own TV station in YouTube. So those are the unique elements of social media. So let's go through them again. The first is, it is internet-based, specifically Web 2.0. Second, the mobility and ubiquity. The third is its focus on users. The fourth, it is multi-way group communications. It is end-to-end, not one-to-one, not one-to-N. It enables large-scale and flexible interactive participation. See, broadcasting also enables large-scale participation, right? We can all watch the same TV event, Band-Aid, and all of those other big musical events. But the problem is, it's one way, right? We just consume. It's not interactive participation. That's what is very different about here. It's not only large-scale, but interactive. Then it provides, or it enables, or it allows co-creation. We can participate in huge scientific projects. We can participate in all sorts of interesting events, and at a very low cost, right? Of course, cost varies, right? If you're in a developed country, it's cheaper, it's faster. In the developed world, it's a bit more expensive and it's a bit slower, but still, compared to the other forms of media, this is dirt cheap. So those are the unique elements of social media that distinguishes it from telephone, that distinguishes it from broadcast, that distinguishes it from newspapers. That makes it social media. You know, they say there are more than one ways to skin a cat. Right? By this we mean, you know, we can take this concept social media and look at it from various directions. And it's important to do that, right? For instance, I don't know if there's this story about three blind men and an elephant. And so somebody was put at the back of the elephant, somebody was put at the front of the elephant, and somebody was put at the side of the elephant. And when asked to describe the elephant, the guy at the back, who's blind, was only able to describe the back of the elephant, right? It has a tail, it has a huge behind, right? The guy on the side of the elephant is only able to feel the side of the elephant. It is massive, you know. And the guy in front of the elephant is able to describe only the trunk of the elephant, because that's the only thing that he could feel. Now, they are not wrong, right? The perspective of the guy at the back was right, also of the side and also of the front. But it does not, he doesn't have a picture of a complete elephant. Right? For him, the elephant is just the back. The other guy, it's just the side. The other guy, it's the front. You have to combine those perspectives so that you get a better view of the elephant. So one perspective alone is not enough. And that's what we're doing here. We're sort of taking different takes on what is social media so we get a full view of it. The first take that we took of social media, we can say, well, maybe that's the front. How is it? What are its essential characteristics? The second take that we took is on the side of this huge elephant, right? And we discussed what is unique about it. How is it different from other media? Now we take the back side view and we discuss social media in terms of social media types. Okay, so the first was the essential elements, the second was the unique elements, and finally the social media types. All three perspectives will help us get a view of the elephant. One may not be enough, right? I mean, it will be correct, but that does not give you a comprehensive view. So this third perspective now on social media is the social media types. What are the different kinds of social media? Now, the first one is what we call social network sites or social networking sites, or SNS for short. Right? Now, most of us are familiar with this through, its specific incarnation. So like Facebook is SNS. In China, Ren is SNS. So we don't usually say social networking, we say Facebook. Right? So we confuse the brand with the product. Facebook is the brand, the product is social networking site. In the Philippines, early on, the refrigerator, the common word for refrigerator was Frigidaire. But because that was the most dominant brand of refrigerators, right? So people say, we have to buy a Frigidaire. They meant we have to buy a refrigerator. So today, that's true also. People don't use, they will say, social networking site. But when you say Facebook, they know. Okay. Now, but Facebook and Ren are perhaps the biggest social networking sites. And they cater to a wide audience. There are specific social network sites for specific groups of people. Like academia.edu are for academics and researchers. Cyword, I guess you're familiar with that. It's the most popular South Korean social network site. Then there's English Baby, which is for students and teachers of English as a second language. GovLoop are for people in and around government. And LinkedIn is for business and professional networking. Now, I must confess that I'm not only in Facebook, but I'm also in academia.edu, in GovLoop, and LinkedIn. Right? But I don't spend a lot of time in academia or GovLoop and LinkedIn. I just visit them occasionally. But my primary social networking site is still Facebook. Because I find that more interesting than just conversations with fellow academics or people who work with government or those in business and professions. I think the point here is there is more to social networking than Facebook. You could, if your primary purpose is to improve yourself as an academic, then you go to academia.edu, because here lots of papers that are not yet published are posted. So you get to see, you get to read rather the first versions of new works from notable academics. Because sometimes when they're published already, you have to pay for them because they're published by a particular journal. And sometimes I don't particularly like paying for academic work. So I go to academia.edu and read the first version of that work that was for free, that was eventually published, and they want to charge me $10 to $15 for. So why do that? Right? So LinkedIn, again, because you want to deal with people in the same area, in the same field. So that's a more focused sort of kind of discussion that you could have there, as opposed to the everything and anything under the sun kind of stuff that you could get from Facebook. The other kind of social media would be the blogs. The blog is the short form for web logs. So these are, early on, a lot of people were saying that blogs would probably replace newspapers. Why go to... Because they say newspapers do take on a particular persuasion, right? If you want or even television, if you want a liberal take of the world, you go to the New York Times or the Washington Post. If you want a conservative view of the world, you go to the Washington Times, right? So you have to know, depending on your political persuasion, there's a newspaper for you. And so people said, well, let's just cut out the middleman. Let's just cut out the editors. What you're interested are the news reports. And so you could get that from other people without the bias of these people. So, for instance, one of the most famous blog sites today is Huffington Post. Right? So that's just a group of bloggers that they put together, and it reads like any newspaper, right? So for somebody who just happens to go into Huffington Post, they would not see the difference between the Huffington Post and the Washington Post, because you get news in both sites, you get commentary on both sites, right? What makes them different is this one is produced by professional editors, reporters, and a publisher. This one is produced by ordinary people, well, not really ordinary, but regular people who are not professional newspaper people. However, that sort of blog killing off the newspaper did not actually happen. And what had happened is that newspapers become more blog-like, and blogs become more like newspapers. Right? So they borrowed elements from each other that make them more, at least maybe from the ordinary perspective, more alike than different. But there's a whole world of difference between the two. Not only because blogs are not printed like newspapers are, but again, the whole idea that blogs is something that ordinary people do, and that ordinary people can blog. So people blog about their cats, right? People blog about the food that they eat, people blog about places they've traveled. So in one instance, you will have a professional travel writer, right, going to places, doing reviews, being paid for it, and being under the employ of a magazine. This one is an ordinary person who goes to these places because they like to go to those places, and they just share their information and their views and their take on that place. Now, the question there is really there a difference? Which would you rather go to? Well, the beauty of this is that you could go to both, right? You can go to the professional view, or you could go to the quote-unquote amateur view. Each has value. Now, what is interesting is that a lot more people tend to believe the average user sometimes than the professional, because maybe he's influenced by his newspaper, by his professional stature, or he gets better treatment because he's more popular. Right? This guy experiences the real world, right? The world that I'm more likely to experience than the world of this person. So this person goes to 5-star hotels, eats in the best restaurants, right? This one goes to the cheapest hotel and finds the cheapest food. So this may be more useful for me when I travel rather than this sort of world that I will never be able to reach. I may aspire to that, but this one is where that will give me the right directions, right? The useful information. So those are blogs. Again, it is a platform, right? So you go to, there are a number of sites where you can go, and they will provide you the software, and you could customize it, and then you could just publish to the world, share your views. Now, according to Technorati, which is one of the companies that look at the social media, the 5 most influential blogs would be Huffington Post, Mashable, BuzzFeed, Business Insider, and The Verge. Now, what is interesting about this is these are more sort of technical, social media oriented or digital lifestyle oriented sites. So people go to blogs to find the latest and the best in social media or in business or in the arts. So I guess in terms of the usual things, they still go to newspapers. SNS, we've discussed blogs. Wiki, right? This is a software, again, that allows users to freely create and edit web pages using any web browser. So that's sort of the technical definition. Now, this is the same platform that is used by Wikipedia. Okay, so Wiki may need introduction. Wikipedia does not, right? Everybody knows Wikipedia. And what is interesting about the Wikipedia is that it is a multilingual, free encyclopedia. Okay? I mean, it's not the first encyclopedia. It's not the most authoritative encyclopedia. We've had encyclopedia for the longest time, right? Maybe the most famous is the Encyclopedia Britannica. Great, even Voltaire, the famous French philosopher of the 19th century, he used to write for an encyclopedia. So encyclopedia is supposed to be a compendium of all the knowledge about the world. And yet, the size of Wikipedia, if you compare it to the professionally produced encyclopedia like Encyclopedia Britannica, I think Encyclopedia Britannica goes up to 20 volumes. So each letter has one book, and sometimes one letter has more. So letters X, Y, and Z would only be one book as compared to A that may be 2 or 3, right? Because how many letters start with an X as compared to an A or an E? So that's how it's published, right? So it's A to Z, and most of the letters would have one book because of varying size, but more or less standard size. So you see that when you go to libraries in the universities, right? You see this whole encyclopedia, volume 1 to 20, or even longer. And then you have specialized encyclopedia, like Encyclopedia of the Social Sciences, shorter than or Encyclopedia of the Natural Sciences. Professionally produced, written by experts. And that has been a staple in universities for the longest time. that is small. The output of that professionally produced encyclopedias would be very small compared to Wikipedia. It's like comparing a 3-story building to a skyscraper. Now, what makes Wikipedia large is that everything under the sun you could find in Wikipedia. It's because anybody who's interested in writing something about anything can contribute. Right? So if I want to put up a Wikipedia page about myself, I'm free to do so. There's nothing stopping me from doing that. Except, why would I do it, right? Who would be interested in reading me? That has stopped me, right? This is just plain vanity. It will not. If I write about myself, I'm not contributing to the body of knowledge. I'm just being vain. But and people have done that. People have written about everything, whatever their interest is, for free. It's really, again, the world volunteering to write something about a topic that they know about and they're passionate about. And it doesn't have to be English. It could be in any other language, right? So you have this massive, massive skyscraper of an encyclopedia that was produced by a whole lot of people who didn't get paid. Unlike World Book or Britannica. It's the platform that made this happen, the Wiki. Right? Now they're saying, oh, but when people write about something, they usually think of themselves, right? There's a bias there. So if I write about myself, the adjectives that I will use will probably be different from adjectives that my people who don't like me would use, right? So how do you take care of that? How do you take care of mistakes? How do you take care of bias? Well, there's another group of volunteers who sort of act as the overseers. And what they do is that they flag things that are not written in the way that they want it written, which is detached and straight to the point. And there are also some version of fact-checking. So for instance, you would see sometimes when you go to a Wikipedia page, they say the contents of this page is not yet, what do they say? They have a nice word for it, right? So it's not yet fully accepted, or it's not yet fully vetted. So it requires further editing, it requires more details, it tells you. So when you go to that page within Wikipedia, then you are warned, right? That, hey, this is not yet vetted, this is not 100% sure, but you can read it. As opposed to other pages where more or less there's consensus already that that is correct. The question then is accuracy. How do we know that Wikipedia is accurate, right? So there was one study that looked at accuracy of, for instance, the science entries in Wikipedia. And then professional scientists did this. They looked at it, evaluated it, and compared it to the science section of the traditional encyclopedia, Encyclopedia Britannica. And they discovered only that same level of inaccuracy or mistakes, right? So the one produced collectively by amateurs, in terms of quality, is as good as the one produced by professionals. So I do that too, right? So my formal training is in political science. So I should know about that literature. And I use Wikipedia a lot because for me it's a handy way of checking if I am doubtful about some of the arguments I make. So I go check it out in Wikipedia. And I find that, it's as good as if I would go to another professional, let's say, encyclopedia of the social sciences. And other professionals have done that and found the same, that, there's not much difference by way of quality between the professionally produced one and the free one produced by amateurs. And this one has another benefit. If you find a mistake, you can check it, correct it quickly. This one will have to wait for the next printing, right? And this is at least printed only yearly before they find they can correct the mistakes. So, the wiki, again, is a very interesting way to capture the world's knowledge, or at least even parts of the world. We'll come back to this because when we discuss collaborative government, the wiki is used also in a very interesting way for knowledge management, right? Because part of the problem of big organizations is that they've forgotten how to do the things that they used to do but don't do anymore, right? So, for instance, and I don't know if this is correct, or maybe if this is an urban myth, NASA does not know how to send man to the moon anymore. Okay, all that knowledge, because we sent man to the moon in the 60s, right, and 70s. They don't know how to do that anymore. All the engineers who were involved in that project have retired. We know how to send man to the space station, right? We know how to do the shuttle, but we don't do manned missions anymore. All of that is lost with the people who have retired. And so there's sort of this huge problem of knowledge management, making sure that the expertise is not lost, and making sure that, because it's not only sad, it's also a waste of resource, right? Because some of the technologies that you may be using there, you may have used there, may still have some relevance, but some of these are, and if for corporations or even other organizations in the developing country, this is a huge problem. How do you pass on the knowledge gained by one generation into the next? So, but that's for the future, and that's just an illustration of how we use wikis today. Another kind of social media is podcasting. Okay, so this is an episodic series of audio, video, PDF, or EPUB files that are subscribed to and downloaded, right? Now, I'm not much of I don't use podcast a lot. I mean, I'm familiar with it. But I discovered that in July 2013, Apple announced that its iTunes store has eclipsed 1 billion podcast subscriptions. So for me, 1 billion is a huge number. I think there are only 3 or 4 countries who have populations bigger than 1 billion. Right? China, India. And there are already 1 billion subscriptions in iTunes alone, right? Because there are other stores that you could go to subscribe to podcasts. Now, these billion subscribers or subscriptions are spread across 250,000 unique podcasts, and in more than 100 languages. So, those are massive numbers. 1 billion subscriptions, 250,000 unique podcasts, right? And not just in one language, but 100 languages. So you could see how many people are using podcasts or subscribing to podcasts, and it's just not an English phenomenon. So mind-boggling number in terms of podcasts. The other one is forums, right? Now I cannot sort of, I always have problems with forums, because when I was learning English, my English professors and teachers kept saying the plural of forum is fora. Right? Okay. So the forum is. So finally I got it, right? Forum. Now they say, oh, forums is also okay. And in fact, nobody uses fora anymore. It dates you, oh, you're old because you use fora. It's the younger guys, they use forums. All right, so forums are online discussion sites, almost about, again, anything and everything under the sun. Now, what is interesting about forums is that this is mostly text-based. So some people say it's not sexy, you know? It's not video, it's not multimedia. All you do is read, write text, and exchange. At least in Facebook, right? You can post photos, you can post video clips, you can post things on YouTube. This one is just straight text, and people say students, young people don't read anymore. They just like video. Well, that's not the case, it seems, because again, in the US, they did a survey of social media users, and they discovered that more Americans over 12 years old read message board each week, and they read more message boards than blogs, right? Again, which is also text-based. So a whole lot of people, 62% of Americans over 12 who are social media users, go to discussion sites. The same survey reveals that nearly 2/3 of those surveyed read online message board each week. Right? The frequency may be low. For instance, they say that of Facebook users, there is a significant portion that check their Facebook page 5 times a day. Well, for me, it's always on the background, so I guess I'm one of those who check it when I'm bored with what I'm writing and I need to get my second wind. So I distract myself by checking my Facebook page. So I guess I'm one of those people who check it more than 5 times a day. But that's a whole lot of checking, right? A whole lot of time spent on looking at your Facebook page. So that's also true of forums. At least 2/3 of them read online message board every week. Then we come to content communities. These are groups that coalesce around an object of interest. So if you like videos, of course, YouTube, and photos are sort of those two sort of generic categories. So the most popular of these content communities would be YouTube and Flickr. YouTube has become the world's video sharing site. Again, what is interesting is 70% of its traffic comes from outside the US, and it is localized in 39 countries across 54 languages. So I think what is very clear today is that social media has been embraced by the rest of the world and not just the US, right? Early on, in the early days of social media, and we're only talking about 10 years, right? We're not talking like in the early days, like 50 years ago. Like 10 years ago, this would probably be more English-centered. Which means English is the predominant language used in social media. But that's not true anymore. Again, here in the case of YouTube, only 30% comes from the US. And at least 54 languages, right? Video posted in YouTube would be in 54 languages. So that's a whole lot of languages, a whole lot of countries, and a whole lot of people posting. But you know, but the U.S. does not have 30% of the world's population. So there's still that imbalance, right? YouTube is 30% English, but the U.S. is not 30%. So they still account for more than, you know, compared to the population. But still, I think as we move forward, there will be more and more content communities in different languages. So you have, for instance, in China, huge sites, both SNS and Wikis, and even content communities in Chinese, right? And so the more people have access to the internet and social media, the bigger the Chinese language sites are going to grow. Is it finally? Yes. And finally, microblogging. Again, microblogging what? But you say Twitter, okay, then you understand. It's limited to 140 characters. That's why it's called microblog, because in the regular blog, you don't have limits, right? You could write, nobody writes 600-page discussions, I hope. Eventually it will reach 600 pages, but they generally write in... as a matter of fact, there's now this new term that has emerged, which I find interesting. It's called long-form journalism. What's long-form journalism? Those are newspaper articles that are long. If you go to the New York Times, Sunday edition, it's very thick, right? If you read that. And when you read the newspaper, when you read the articles in New York, they're long, right? They're much longer than the usual now that has emerged in terms of newspapers, right? Before brevity. Before, this was the norm. Long form journalism, long articles that examine the issues from various angles, talking to various experts. Today we want it in bit sizes, right? So if you can't Twitter it, it's too long for me. If you can't tell me in so many words what is it you want to say, maybe you don't know what you want to say, right? There's some discipline in microblogging because it forces you to compress your thoughts, and so that it becomes very clear, right? I think the word is to crystallize it. So that's useful if you're on the run and you want to know what's happening. Getting a Twitter feed from your newspaper or your news TV station is good because it tells you the most essential thing. Nelson Mandela dies. How much longer, right? That's enough for you to know. But then you want to go to long-form journalism for the historical background about Nelson Mandela. And you want to go to blogs of people who have known Nelson Mandela because they have insights that would otherwise not be available in newspapers. Or if they are reflected in newspapers, there are only 2 or 3 sentences. So that's, I think, in a sense, that's what's very interesting about the world today, is that you could get your information in various places and in lengths that you prefer. So on the go, you want microblogging. For a longer background and more up-to-date, personalized view, you go to blogs. If still that's not enough, you look for videos in YouTube. And then you could talk about it with your friends in Facebook. Right? So the whole experience is so varied. And what is interesting is that it's also all up to date. You don't rely on, and that's why social media beats traditional media in, let's say, disaster reporting. Because in traditional media, the reporter would say, some people have suffered from floods. In social media, my house is flooded, right? So you get a different perspective, more urgent, and it's posted as it happens. Whereas newspaper, you'll wait the following day to read about that event. Or in the news TV, you have to wait for 7 o'clock news or the 10 o'clock news for that to be reflected. So we're in the world where, you know, you have all... So I guess the right way to say it is that social media has provided us with a wider range of information source. And what is interesting is that these are all up-to-date information, as it happens, real time. But is everything true in social media? Of course not. There are dangers, obviously, associated with non-professional reporting, right? It may be biased. It may take on, they may be promoting their own agenda. It's not neutral. It's one perspective of events. And so, as you know, social media grows, as more and more of us join social media and benefit from social media, there are responsibilities also that that we have to share. One is that if we're posting, we have to post accurately, right? Or that we should be wary about some posts or some blogs about, because there's danger that we will only read what we want to read, right? Because now it's possible not to hear divergent view. Your friends share the same ideas, you read all the same blogs, you watch the same movies. So your worldview has become very limited in a world where it's possible to have a very wide perspective. So that's sort of the downside, and we will get to that at some other point. At this point, I think what we want to stress is we have a variety of means by which we could get information and share information. Now, as I said at the beginning, the question then for us is this something that we could use to enrich people's lives? Is it something that we could use so that more people have more choices? Is it something that we could use to promote greater freedom? So now that we have a better idea of social media, then we examine this question in terms of how is social media changing society? How is social media creating social change?